Christina Corbin with FoxNews.com, live at the Democratic Convention. And here with us we have author and filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. D'Souza is out with a movie and a book on Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. Mr. D'Souza, why don't you tell us a little bit about your book and the movie that's out?
The book is called Hillary's America. The movie has the same title. The subtitle is The Secret History of the Democratic Party. It's perfectly timed because we released it this weekend, right before the Democratic National Convention. And so the Democrats have their official story, which is that they're the party of the little guy, the ordinary guy. They fight for racial justice and social justice and women. And what we show in the movie is that the opposite is true. The Democrats have always been, for 150 years, they're the party of bigotry, of slavery, of the Ku Klux Klan. They fought women's suffrage tooth and nail. And it's not like things are much better today, because even today they exploit minorities by creating a kind of dependency in which the only interest that they have in those people is votes.
That's interesting. In your op-ed on FoxNews.com, you mentioned the Clinton Foundation when you talk about what you call the corruption and the bigotry within the Democratic Party, and also the stealing, you say.
Yeah, we've had corruption at the local level in politics. In New York in the 19th century, there was something called the Tammany Hall racket. And so what they would do is they would hand out contracts to their friends. They would loot the treasury. But that's in New York. And then we had it with the Daily Machine in Chicago. Now, Hillary and Bill have taken it to the national level. I mean, we've never had a president before who's renting out the Lincoln bedroom, taking pictures off the walls to take them home, or selling pardons to big-time criminals. We've never had a Secretary of State before, like Hillary, who is renting out American foreign policy to Saudi billionaires and Canadians who want mineral rights and Russian oligarchs who want our uranium. I mean, to make money on American foreign policy, what could be more unconscionable than that?
Now, a lot of people would take issue with your depiction of the party. They would argue that this is a party that champions minorities, it champions the poor. What would you say to your critics?
Well, let's look at why blacks switched over to the Democratic Party. Blacks used to be Republicans for a long time. The reason they switched to the Democratic Party has nothing to do with race. They switched in the 1930s because of the economic benefits of the New Deal. So blacks were in terrible state. They were very poor. They were starving. And the Democrats went, basically, here's some money. So they bribed the blacks to move over to the Democratic Party. At that time, the Democratic Party was the party of segregation and the Ku Klux Klan. So blacks were leaving the party of Lincoln and joining the party of the Klan. It was a terrible bargain. I think long-term we see that it's not a good deal, because many of the urban neighborhoods that were in a miserable state in 1968 are in the same miserable state today. And these places are run by Democratic mayors, Democratic superintendents, Democratic everything, not a Republican to be found. So they can't put the blame on the Republicans.
I see. Let's get into sort of the current headlines here. What do you make of the DNC email hack?
Well, it's outrageous. The Democrats, I mean, think of their name. We're a Democratic Party. We have democratic elections, which means free and fair elections. Turns out they don't. They're running a Soviet-style election for the primary. You got Bernie Sanders, admittedly an implausible, ridiculous candidate, but at least let him run. Let him run. Instead, you have Debbie Wasserman Schultz putting her finger on the scale to help Hillary. I mean, this is a subversion of our democratic process. Now, the Republicans, they had a big cage fight, 17 of them in the ring, a lot of blood on the ground, but it was at least a fair fight. And at the end of the day, Trump tapped all the other guys out, so he emerged victorious. We may not be for Trump, but we're like, hey, he won fair and square. So we can unify behind Trump. Really hard to unify behind Hillary when you know she's cheated. She's rigged the process.
What do you make of these theories that are floating around now that Russia may have had a hand in leaking the emails out there as a way to help Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, I don't know about any of that. It's certainly bizarre. If it's true, it's ironic, because here you have the Democrats trying to run a Soviet-style election. And if the Russians are the ones who blew the whistle on it, it would be particularly juicy and delicious. So I don't know if they did, but if they did, they've done this country a big service.
Let me ask you a little bit about Hillary's running mate, Tim Kaine. Personally, he says he's against abortion. Politically, he says he's for it. Do you feel that that's a contradiction of sorts for him?
Well, intellectually, that makes no sense, because if someone says, I'm personally opposed to abortion, the first question is, why? Why are you personally opposed? Well, because I think the fetus isn't just a thing. I think it actually is a developing human being, and we shouldn't go around killing developing human beings. Then, if that's true, what sense does it then make to say, even though I feel that way, somehow politically I think it's okay. Politically, I'm not going to stand in the way of somebody else killing developing human beings, even though I personally wouldn't do it. I think it's incoherent, it's cynical, and it's a way of someone trying to sort of have your moral cake and eat it too.
Critics of the Democratic Party, most notably Donald Trump this morning, are pointing out that ISIS was never mentioned last night during the opening night of the convention. No mention of ISIS. What's your take on that?
Well, ISIS is very inconvenient for the Democrats because ISIS didn't exist before the Democrats came to power. In other words, when Hillary was appointed Secretary of State, nobody knew the word ISIS. And maybe it was an ISIS, but we didn't even hear about it. It hadn't done anything. We heard about Al-Qaeda. So ISIS is in some ways, I can't say it's a creation of Hillary, because it's a creation of America withdrawing its power from the Middle East. When you create a power vacuum, all the bad guys then can get together. And so ISIS is actually the result of that power vacuum in the Middle East.
I see. The speeches last night from Elizabeth Warren, from Bernie Sanders, they all called for unity within the party. Do you think that's going to be a problem for them going forward? What are your thoughts?
I think the Democratic Party will be reasonably united. At the end of the day, they do that. The Republican Party will be reasonably united as well. But I think that there are well-meaning Democrats who have a bad taste in their mouth about the Clintons. First of all, they had kind of forgotten what it was like under the Clintons 15 years ago, but it's all coming back now with the two email scandals. There's Hillary deleting her email scandal, and now the latest email scandal, the fixing the election email scandal number 2. We begin to realize that the Clintons are sordid characters, and they will revive a sordid strain in the Democratic Party that is better left buried.
I see. And top 3 problems for Hillary Clinton as you see it going forward?
Well, I think with Hillary, the basic idea is her campaign to win the election, she's going to have to say something like, you may think I'm dishonest, but. And so the but is that our party fights for the ordinary man. We're a party that fights for justice. We have noble aspirations. Now, I think that is a kind of a pitch. And by pitch, what I mean is it's a way to con the American people into thinking that all these people here in Philadelphia are out for the little guy. As you can see, they're all out for themselves. They're super busy. They've got their name tags. They're meeting and greeting. They're making connections. These are sort of like the overlords of the Democratic plantation. And they're meeting here to preach the virtues of dependency. I, for one, am not buying it. I think that people should protest all these shenanigans by going to see this movie, then going to Barnes & Noble at Costco, picking up a copy of the book. It's going to equip you against a lot of it. It's a vaccination against a lot of these viruses that are loose here in Philadelphia.
I see. And so will you be voting for Trump?
I'll be voting for Trump. I stayed out of the primaries, and my wife and I were newlyweds. We were married by Ted Cruz's dad, Rafael Cruz. But look, I fully understand American politics is fought in teams. If you want to stop the Hillary Democrats, there's no way to do it except with Trump and the Republicans. So all this never Trump nonsense has to stop. At the end of the day, there's no actual alternative to Trump. I'm for Trump.
Did you like what Ted Cruz did at the convention?
I think it was a mistake. It was a mistake because, of course, everybody's going to vote their conscience. You don't have to tell people to vote their conscience. They're going to do that anyway. But you don't get up on the Republican podium at the Republican convention and not endorse the Republican candidate. If that's how you feel, don't speak.
You think that's going to hurt him politically?
I don't know. I like Ted Cruz. I think he's a great guy. He's a really smart guy. I think in some ways he's a little bit green at the presidential level. I hope he learns from this experience. I think he has a great future in politics.
Mr. D'Souza, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll find his book and movie. That's a wrap. I'm Christina Corbin, live from the Democratic Convention for FoxNews.com.